Om Sthapakaya cha dharmasya sarvadharma swarupine avatara varisthaya Ramakrishnaya te namaha. In our previous class, we referred to one Ramananda Roy of the village of Dere, which was the ancestral village of Sri Ramakrishna. So this Ramananda Roy plays an important part in Sri Ramakrishna's Divya Leela, the great divine play, or the wonderful play the incarnation of Sri Ramakrishna enacted. So there obviously in every play there will be some villains. So Ramananda Roy was one such villain who was responsible for Sri Ramakrishna's family, especially Khudiram Chattopadhyay, to leave the village, their ancestor village. As I said, 3 villages were located side by side. They were Satbede, a couple of miles, it's not very far from Kamarpukur. Satbede, Narayanpur and Dere or Derepur. So the temple, the place or that house where Sri Ramakrishna's ancestors lived has been renovated, and now there is a small center. A small group has started a private center there. It does not, I think, belong to the Ramakrishna mission, but it is run by a private trust. So they have nicely preserved it, renovated that cottage and built a small temple in that village, because it is the ancestral village of Sri Ramakrishna. So who are the ancestors? Now before that we come to Ramananda Roy, who was a very cruel person, though they say that his dynasty was totally destroyed because of the sins of oppression that he committed. Without any reason, if he was annoyed with any person of the village, he would deprive him of all the possessions, even by implicating them in some false cases. So after his death, obviously he had no successors, his whole family was destroyed because of the sins he committed against many innocent people whom he had deprived of their property, wealth. For some reason, if they did not find, he was annoyed with somebody for some reason, even if it is not their fault. Anyway, before that we'll discuss Manikram Chattopadhyay of Dere village. Nearly 150 years ago, I mean it is more than 150 years ago, a middle class Brahmin family lived in Dere village. They were of a wonderful noble descent and virtuous conduct, as we can see from Sri Ramakrishna's father's excellent character, that his word was taken as gospel truth, because everybody in the village knew that he would not speak an untruth. Even by mistake, he would not tell a lie. So they were all of noble descent, a very pious Brahmin family, and were worshippers of Ramachandra. Sri Rama was their family deity. That is why you will find everybody in their family, Ram Kumar, some say Rameshwar, and even Ram Krishna. Some say it is because of this tradition to have the names beginning with Ram, because Ram was their deity. Anyway, this Manik Ram, also in Manik, you'll find in his name also there is a Ram, Manik Ram. So this Manik Ram Chattopadhyay belonged to a family whose house was in this Dere village, and it was bordering a pond. As I said, all the ponds are named after these. The villages are named after these ponds. For example, Kamar Pukur. Pukur is a pond. So Chatujje Pukur, that is the pond adjacent to their house. that meant that it was just to indicate that Manikram Chattopadhyay was the owner of this house, and the pond next to him was, normally they would refer to it as Chatujje Pond. That is that pond which belongs to Chatujje Pukur. which belonged to Manikram Chattopadhyay. So he had three sons, this Manikram, the ancestor of Sri Ramakrishna, and Kshudiram, we do not know exactly, but he was probably born in 1775. That is what, because the birth records and all are not available. Then came a daughter, Ram Sheela, and he had two sons, Nidhi Ram and Kanai Ram. See, all the names had Ram in their names. Ram Sheela was the daughter's name, and two sons, Nidhi Ram and Kanai Ram, along with Shudhi Ram. So that is how this family of Dere lived. Manikram Chattopadhyay, they lived happily in this Dere village. So we do not know exactly whether Shudhiram learned any practical money earning trade as he grew up, because Brahmins, though they did all the rituals in the village and earned a small amount, normally Brahmins are supposed to be poor. That is the tradition in India. The highest caste is given a privilege because they choose voluntary poverty. So most of the stories, if you see, uh, the Indian stories, especially those depicting rural India, with the rural India as a setting, you will find a poor Brahmin, a rich merchant. So the rich people were normally the Vaishyas, and the Kshatriyas were administrators, and like Ramananda Roy, who was maybe a landowner and he owned a lot of property. So similarly, the Brahmins of the village, normally they would be poor because they were not supposed to uh, be after money. That would make them Brahmins who do not stick to the vows that they were supposed to take, like truthfulness, many things which are supposedly, apparently, they are impractical things, but these are great noble virtues. Virtues like contentment, to be happy with one's needs, not be smote with the greed. You see, people very often they have enough for their needs, but it is the problem. The problem begins when they run after their greed. So these Brahmins, whoever followed the path of a life of a pure Brahmin, and they were supposed to be voluntarily work only, spend their time in meditation, prayer, austerity, and for that, society would provide their basic needs. That is how they did, and some simple rituals. So we do not know, because the British influence, the colonial influence, and hundreds of years of Mughal rule had changed this caste system. The original purity of the caste system, where a Brahmin was not necessarily one who was born in a Brahmin family. That was the original idea behind the caste, that you would be considered a Brahmin if your occupation, sole occupation, would be spreading of knowledge, whether it is secular or spiritual. Mostly it was spiritual, which was considered to be a higher form of a gift. And if spiritual knowledge was your only aim, then the maintenance of that family, whatever little he needed, it would be supplied by society. So that is how the caste system was originally planned. So a Brahmin who runs after wealth, who runs after greed, is no longer qualified, though he might be born in a Brahmin family. So true to that tradition, Shudhiram was, we do not know whether he had learnt any practical trade which would result in amassing a great amount of wealth. But one thing was there, God had blessed him. I mean, like most of the Brahmins who were on the path of Brahma, a Brahmin was one who followed the spiritual pursuit and was happy with whatever nature or Prakriti provided him. As long as his needs were fulfilled, and if he was content. So the qualities like truthfulness, because you don't need to tell lies. Only if you want to cheat people, if you want to earn wealth by following adharma, then only you need uh, certain evil traits are seen in you. But truthfulness, contentment, these are true traits which are found in people who are happy with their whatever, if their needs are fulfilled. So forgiveness, some kind of renunciation, and other noble qualities are considered by the scriptures also to be the characteristics of a good Brahmin, not just by birth. So he was tall and strong, but he was very thin and he had a fair complexion. That is how the description goes. And true to his family tradition, they had intense devotion to their Ishta Devata, that family Kula Devata, which was Sri Ramchandra. So they would call him Raghuveer. That was the name, the Ishta of the Shudiram Chattopadhyay's family. They would be worshipping the traditional image Shalagrama of Raghuveer, which is worshipped even today. Raghuveer, normally Vishnu is worshipped in a stone, in a polished stone emblem, which is known as Shalagrama. So he would pick flowers as would any good or noble Brahmin do. Pick flowers, worship Raghuveer, and then only he would eat. So people had to fast. So he was so rigid about these rules, and the type of Brahmin that he was, he could not accept gift from anybody. Anybody who had earned money in any sort of way, these Brahmins would not accept. So he was a very traditional sort of Brahmin who would not accept gifts from all people. Only selected people where he performed certain services, he was supposed to take gifts from them. He would not even drink water from each and everybody's hand. And there was one more rule where it was considered, see, even these things were followed in the villages, that any Brahmin who gave away their daughters in exchange for a dowry or money, Shudiram was so strict that he would not drink water from their house, because they had committed a sin by exchanging their daughters, which are Shakti Swarupa, for a little money. Nowadays, it has become a fashion. It is like these things have become, at least in the Hindu tradition, it has become a must. Every father is worried, even if he belongs to a Brahmin family, that they have to collect some money. That is what happened in poor villages. Many of them suffered because they did not have enough money to marry off their daughters. That was the degradation that had happened. And such families, such Brahmins, even if they were Brahmins, Shudiram would not drink water from their house, especially if it was known that somebody had married off the daughter by giving a huge sum of money in exchange for a dowry. He would not uh, drink water from that family. Such was his adherence to good conduct, nobility, and uh, noble qualities like truthfulness, contentment with whatever he got, a simple and truthful life. Because of this steadfast devotion and good conduct, the villagers, naturally, such people are respected, not because they possessed money, not because now the trend is everywhere in the world, you'll find, even in India, it's not the nobility of a person that normally uh, uh, is responsible for getting respect. If you have money, you get respect. That is unfortunate, because our society, our caste system was never designed to be built on this system. Money had nothing to do. In fact, the more money you possess, the lower you went in the caste hierarchy. So, good conduct meant you were happy with the needs, you led a austere life, a life of forgiveness, life of renunciation, and study of scriptures, the higher values of life, which uh, enabled you to be uh, considered as noble. That is, and such people, though they were poor, they just lived with their needs fulfilled in any village, they were given that kind of respect. So Sri Ramakrishna was born in such a family where his father was very well known and respected in this village. And they used to worship Raghuvir. As I said, they were all devotees of Sri Ramchandra. After his father's death, whatever little ancestral property was there, each of these Brahmins would be given a small piece of land, would possess a small piece of land, which was enough. They would grow rice and other paddy and other vegetables, and that would be sufficient for their living, because their needs were not so much and they were not greedy. So he performed his household duties as a good noble Brahmin would do, and remained steadfast in his religious practices, his pujas and his spiritual pursuits. He married, but his wife died young. So when he was about 25, as was the tradition in those days, he had to remarry. His second wife's name was Chandramani Devi, but her family called her Chandra as a short form. Her father's house was the village of Sarati Mayapur. So that was very near Kamarpukur, and she was very devoted and a wonderfully noble lady. But her most remarkable qualities which she exhibited, this Chandramani Devi, was her devotion to God, and helping and having aspiring to have the company of holy people. She was very devoted and did not miss a single opportunity. As I told you, these villages, especially Dere and later on Kamarpukur, where they shifted, was a place which many wandering sadhus and other monks and all pilgrims would pass through this village to go to Puri. When they came from the western side of India, they had to pass through, or in northern India normally. So people who lived north or northwest or northeast, they had to pass through Kamarpukur. That was one convenient route. Most of the traveling took place, people would walk by foot, especially when they went on pilgrimage, they would walk on foot. So anyway, she was fond of serving not only God, but offering that prasad and her service to all the holy people who came. And there were a lot of guests, though they were poor, they used to serve these guests, especially monks. So her other qualities, which has been described, Chandramani, was her deep faith and her loving and affectionate nature towards all. That is why, like her husband, Kshudiram Chattopadhyay, she was also very dear to everybody, wherever she was. Even in later life, when she was staying at Nahabat in Dakshineshwar, Sri Ramakrishna served her very well. Holy Mother also used to live below. She used to live in the first floor of the Nahabat, the small house. She was so noble and wonderful. She had a wonderful nature, which made her. Uh, she was very affectionate and loving, so people reciprocated, and naturally she was loved by everybody in the village. Now, her birth date, we are not sure, but most probably the birth year was 1791, and she would have been 8, as it was very common in those days, at the time of her marriage in 1799, when Kshudiram had to marry for the second time when his first wife died when she was very young. So our first son Ram Kumar, according to records, was probably born in 1805. 5 years later, her daughter Katyayani was born. That is around 1810. Then 1826, her second son, younger son, was Rameshwar, who was of course older than Sri Ramakrishna. Rameshwar was born. So Ram Kumar was born in 1805, 1810. Katyayani, the daughter, the second child was the daughter, and then there was Rameshwar after many years. So then there came a turning point in their life. They were living in Dere, all the 3 children except Sri Ramakrishna, other 3 siblings, they were born in Dere village. So Chandramani Devi gave birth to Ramkumar, Katyayani and Rameshwar while they were still living in Dere village. So it did not take much long for Shudiram to realize how difficult it was to manage a house, a house with 3 children, if he followed the path of Dharma, which of course he followed, but it was difficult. It was so difficult to make ends meet because that was the period in their life when they were tested. A lot of troubles came their way, even before Sri Ramakrishna was born. So, shortly after the birth of his daughter, that is Katyayani, Shudiram, had to face a very terrible situation in his village. It was a terrible predicament. He had not anticipated this kind of trouble. So that is why even to the noblest of families, people who are so truthful, so unselfish, many people ask, why does God punish them, or why does God give trouble to such people? So there is a divine play, there is a divine purpose in why God gives. It's not that he is cruel or he doesn't take care of his devotees. There is some higher purpose which we do not see. Perhaps the stage was set for Shudiram to leave this village and go to a village where some noble people lived, like Kamarpukur. We'll see who are the noble people with whom Shudiram Chattopadhyay and later on Sri Ramakrishna and all grew up. Why Kamarpukur is such a special village. But anyway, the reason why they left Dere village, where they were no doubt poor, but they had a lot of difficulties, but he held on to truth and followed all the noble qualities which was expected of a good Brahmin. So, we have mentioned about the oppressive nature of Ramananda Roy, the landlord of the village, who would take the first possible opportunity to deprive people of their wealth and their home. And he used to use all sorts of illegal means, is to follow adharma. And that is why towards the end of his life, though he was rich, everything went to waste. They say all the wealth was squandered and people took advantage and everything was taken away from him because of his cruel nature. He had deprived a lot of good people. So Ramananda became annoyed with, it so happened that after the birth of Katyayani, that is the second child of Shudiram, they were already facing difficulties, but suddenly Ramananda became annoyed with somebody in Derepur and instigated a false lawsuit. In those days, because of the British, everything would be settled with lawsuit. There was a local panchayat and the local courts, but people normally went to these higher courts where somehow they could bribe and get justice. But anyway, the protocols and the rules had to be followed. So to harm that person with whom Ramananda was annoyed, he instigated a false lawsuit. He said, I'll see you. I'll see that you leave this village. So the landlord now found that to win the case, he needed a trustworthy witness. To win a case, though you have money, you have power, but still you need a witness, a trustworthy witness. And the judge would accept only people who had a reputation for speaking the truth. Anybody and everybody with a bad reputation could not testify before the judge, and the judge would not accept it because his record said that he was not trustworthy. The only person or the best person for this was Shudiram, because the entire village, not only that village, everybody in Dere and the nearby villages knew of his noble nature, that whatever he spoke, he would rather die rather than speak an untruth. So his words carried a lot of authority. That is the power that comes because of being a Brahmin in spirit. It's not just Brahmin by birth that makes a person noble. Anybody can be born in a Brahmin family, but he has to have those qualities. and that those qualities that make him a true Brahmin. So people misunderstand the caste system. They think by being born in a Brahmin family, one becomes automatically becomes a Brahmin. No, if he has greed, there cannot be a greedy Brahmin. There cannot be a Brahmin who resorts to untruth to earn a living. So these were not accepted, and Shudiram was such a noble father, a noble Brahmin. So anyway, the religious-minded Shudiram did not had never gone. He dreaded legal like good people. They never want to go to courts to settle their disputes. He never had even gone to any court for any litigation. His needs, he did not need to do it. But even for a just cause, he never went to such a level that needs him to go to the court, that needed him to go to the court. So Ramananda's request made him extremely anxious. So he said he was putting pressure on Shudiram to bear false witness. If he did not do, everybody knew that Shudiram would be forced out of the village and he would incur the landlord Ramananda Roy's rage. Though he fully realized the consequences, he refused to testify. He said, I am not going to do it. And especially, I am not going to say an untruth which would harm either others or anybody else in the world. Why should I do it? Then he was threatened. The landlord accused, then decided to now teach him a lesson. So he accused Shudiram falsely and also filed a lawsuit against Shudiram. And of course, he managed to get some witness and he manipulated uh, the case and somehow won. And he obtained Shudiram's paternal property through an auction. His house was auctioned. There was not a small piece of land for Kshudiram in Derepur. He made life so difficult that without any kind of means for subsistence, how can he live without land? He dispossessed of his house. He had to live. So all the villagers were genuinely sympathetic to him. Not that people did not respect him, but they could not help him because they knew that if anybody goes to help uh, Shudiram, then Ramananda Roy would take action against them. So though they wanted, they knew something. He has been cheated and he has been deprived of his rightful ownership of his house and other things. It was auctioned in front of him and he had to leave that village, deprived of his land and property. But he did not give up his truth. He said, I can't bear false witness even if you threaten me. So at the age of 40, can you imagine, Shudiram became a destitute person. The property he had inherited and everything he had acquired from his own effort through hard work, whatever little land he had, it disappeared just like a cloud blown apart by a gust of wind. So it came all of a sudden at the age of 40 with two children. Of course, Rameshwar was not born. Ram Kumar and Katyayani were born. This happened just after the birth of that girl, uh, the young Katyayani. So, uh, but it did not disturb him. He had so much faith in his Raghuveer. He took refuge in Raghuveer and calmly reflected, what shall I do now? And he quietly left the village, his paternal property or the home which he had for good, with a view. He said it's better to live away from this evil people. So the stage was set for the birth of Sri Ramakrishna in a nearby village which was known as Kamarpukur, where a great good friend of Kshudiram, as they say, when you depend totally on the Lord makes some arrangement. So that is exactly what is seen in his life. He just resigned himself to Kshudiram and he decided to move. We discussed about Suklal Goswami of Kamarpukur. He and Kshudiram were long-standing close friends because of their similar disposition. They say birds of the same feather flock together. There's an English proverb where noble people always like the company of other noble people. So Suklal, when he heard of his predicament, his friend's predicament, he was extremely disturbed. So he invited Shudiram. You see, that is why they say a friend in need is a friend indeed. So this Shuklal Goswami invited Shudiram and said, "You come and settle in Kamarpukur permanently." He offered him a few thatched huts which were there. He owned some property because his ancestors were the family priests of the Raja of Bardwan. So he had a decent income by virtue of being the royal Brahmins who officiated in the royal puja and other things. So whatever little wealth he possessed and whatever property he had, he decided to share with his friend. So Shudiram found that Lord had answered his prayers, Raghuvir had answered his prayers, and he realized that this is nothing but the grace of the Lord. So very happily he shifted, and the well-wisher Suklal was so happy about this move that he made a permanent gift of a rice field nearly half an acre in size to the righteous, to this father of Sri Ramakrishna, Khudiram, for the maintenance. Because just a house will not suffice. He would need something. So he had some land and he made a permanent gift. He made a deed, and even to this day, this gift which resulted in Shudiram settled in Kamarpukur, and that facilitated the advent of an incarnation. This land is so half an acre plot of rice field. It's not a very big land. Hardly with half an acre you can hardly maintain a family. So with all the rice that grew there, a rice field, that uh, was given as a gift by this Suklal Goswami. This gift is so pure. The intentions behind this gift, there are various the Gita describes the various types of gifts that a person can give a huge donation, but it is the attitude and the purity behind the gift that really matters, even though if it is small. Sudama's poha, for example, Sri Krishna very gleefully accepted, though it was a very humble gift from a poor Sudama who came all the way to meet his old classmate Sri Krishna. And Sri Krishna took this humble gift which he wanted to hide, because he saw these people, rich people, are giving so many rich gifts to Krishna, and my gift is so humble. He was feeling shy, but Sri Krishna said, "No, I want whatever you have brought for me. I want it," and he took it. So similarly, the Suklal was very happy that he could be of some use to this noble Shudiram, and gave that land for the maintenance of his family. Even today, even to this date, so many years after this gift, not only Sri Ramakrishna grew by eating the rice that was grown there, even today, if you go to our Kamarpukur ashrama, there is a tradition that the rice that grows on this field alone is fed to Sri Ramakrishna. Sri Ramakrishna's bhoga, or the offering that they made, the rice offering that they made, the payas that they make, everything has to be made. No food will be cooked for Sri Ramakrishna, at least the offering that they make, and that will be distributed as prasad. So you can imagine what a wonderful gift you can say it was done with so much of purity and sattvic attitude. So that is the small gift that he did, which was enough for Sri Ramakrishna to live in Kamarpukur. So Hridayaram Mukhopadhyay, later on, when this biography was written, he mentioned the name of Anup Goswami in place of Suklal Goswami. But afterwards, Swami Shardanandji verified it from the Laha family, the big Lahas of Kamarpukur, the pleasant landlords, because the Many times it so happened that the Goswami family would sell off some land, the new landlords. The Lahas were also very noble family. They were very fond of Sri Ramakrishna. So from the present landlords, Swami Shardanandji corrected, because Hriday was the only source. So he had told that the plot was given by Anup Goswami, but it was not Anup Goswami, it was Sukhlal Goswami. So it is said that Gopilal Goswami installed a large image of Gopeshwar Shiva. So Gopilal Goswami was also an ancestor of Suklal. So that Gopeshwar Shiva Mandir is also there. So nearly 150 bighas, which is a measure that is nearly the land which Shudiram lost. There are no records, but Hriday told that they had almost 50 acres of land in Derepur, the land which was taken away from them forcibly. Can you imagine? 150 bighas is a very big land, 50 acres of land which they had, which they worked hard and somehow supported the family with that. That was taken away on a half-acre plot, which was, that too was a gift from his friend. The Lord was born. The family of Shudiram had to be shifted. And this is the village, this is the house where Sri Ramakrishna was born. So one wonders how noble this Suklal Goswami would have been, how much punya, how much of religious merit he might have got, that he became responsible. And even today, the rice that is grown in his land, which should be so pure, that even today the offering, so after so many years, more than 150 years, you will find the rice that is grown, the paddy that is grown in this particular plot of land which was gifted to his father, is being used to feed Sri Ramakrishna. So now after coming here, Kshudiram's life was changed. He was pretty active when he was in Dere. But as is expected of a Brahmin, that is the wonderful system of Hindu Dharma, that at some stage of your life, he was quite, by those standards, the standards of that day, was quite old. 40, 45 would be considered to be a age when one would retire. That's because people had a lifespan of hardly 60 years. To complete 60 years would be something very great. So the state of mind, as it happened with all the Brahmins, all the, not only Brahmins, all the noble people, whichever caste he belonged to, if he had characteristics like that of a Brahmin, even a Shudra, a person born to a Vaishya, Sudra or a Kshatriya family, would be considered as noble as the Brahmin. There were very, very great noble people from the other castes also. Because if they were not greedy, if they were happy with the needs, with their needs fulfilled, if they led a life of ashrama dharma, varna ashrama dharma. Varna means caste, ashrama means the stage of life, like brahmacharya ashrama. You are supposed to dedicate your life to learning, both secular to earn a living and spiritual. Both had to go side by side, unlike modern day education where no provision is made for the spiritual well-being, the overall well-being. All the human possibilities are not explored, as we discussed in the Wednesday class. The human possibilities do not exhaust themselves by earning, having some academic degree, getting a job, which today, even in India, I don't blame the Western culture for that. Even in India, if you find, everybody seems to be spending all his energy and invest all the money, energy, time in educating their children, trying to give them the best academic knowledge. The Paravidya is not taken care of. Aparavidya, that helps them to earn a living, is definitely necessary. Without the skills and the academic knowledge, one cannot live in this world a decent life. But there is a limit. If we become very greedy and become so much career oriented that we fail to see that there is the need for paravidya also. The sacred and the secular, both should be combined in one's life. That is what happened in the case of Shudiram's life. After having 150 acres of land, when he lost everything, that is why they say that everything that happens in one's life has a positive side to it. We may think it as a tragedy, but certain circumstances force us to become noble, to become spiritual. So you saw same thing. The reason why Shudiram's life became reclusive was that he was suddenly reminded of the grim truth which Indian tradition always planned. The Brahmacharya ashrama, when you were supposed to acquire knowledge up to the age of 16, then the Grahastha ashrama up to the age of 32 or even 40, where you could earn a decent living, save something for the future, hand over everything to the children, and then take up Vanaprastha ashrama. So he was in that stage when he was contemplating that what is the use of continuously running after money. A day has to come when before the passing away of a person, a person was supposed to earn spiritual merit also. The spiritual side also should not be neglected. So the Vanaprastha stage was planned so that people could progressively withdraw themselves. Once Rameshwar and this Ram Kumar and other elder sons, they grew up, there was no need for Shudiram to spend a lot of time and energy in earning. Their sons would take over. Let them do. They have finished their Brahmacharya ashrama. They would now go to Grahastha ashrama. Let them do their. Then one should withdraw from the family affairs. That is exactly what not forced, that inspired, because he had read the Shastras, he was following all the dharmic injunctions of Hinduism, so well planned that you have to have a withdrawal before finally embracing sannyasa. So sannyasa ashrama was almost like mandatory. Even if you don't wear the ochre robes, a person was supposed to take some kind of formal sannyasa after vanaprastha. What will one do after vanaprastha? One had to prepare for a higher life of moksha. That was the wonderful planning made by our dharmic texts. And only if we, the Sanatana Dharma or Hindu Dharma, if we can claim to be Hindus, if we follow this Varnashrama, this beautiful system which was designed by our forefathers, the social structure which was based on moksha. Moksha was something, freedom was something which held together dharma. What was this dharma for? Why did Shudiram decide to lead a reclusive life in Kamarpukur? He said, I have enough of this. I have seen the 150 acres which he had, how hard he had to work to raise a family. But enough is enough. At some stage, you have to think of a slow withdrawal into this Vanaprastha. That is exactly what happened. So, his son was just 10-year-old, you can imagine. He was hardly 40 and he had a 4-year-old daughter, Katyayani. With these two small siblings, they had not even started earning. They shifted. He, his wife Chandramani and 2 children, they shifted to Kamarpukur. And when he came in, his state of mind was such, the world appeared to be filled with jealousy, hatred, and seemed like a dark and horrible cremation ground. Because he had not expected that such things would happen in his life. But his love, his affection, his compassion, his righteousness, his adherence to dharma, and other noble qualities, they actually raised hope and happiness in his life. He had not lost hope in the Lord. See, suffering may bring some kind of setback in a person's life. But what saves him under those circumstances is the noble qualities. That is why the Ishopanishad at the end says, Kritosmara, Kritosmara. It says again and again, remember your good deeds. They are not going to go waste. Any noble deed you have done in this life or in the previous life, as Sri Krishna says, is not going to go waste. And that gives strength. The good deeds of the past, whatever you have done in the past, whether it is in this life or the previous life, that raises hope and happiness in one's heart. That gives peace. That gives a sort of security, contentment that I have done nothing bad in my life. So the Lord will save me, no matter what setback is there in our life. So he was, in a way, very much disturbed because of his sudden uh, taking away of his wealth and everything driven out. But then he said there must be a noble purpose. He he was forced to think deeply about his spiritual future. So one can imagine a couple thinking, a noble couple, both. And was not alone. His wife was a great support. Chandramani Devi also was a very noble lady, and they were comparing their past. Maybe it was much more comfortable, more property. Here there would be less property, but there was less trouble. So their needs, when they were fulfilled, they felt that we don't have to be greedy. Just because we lost all our property doesn't mean we have to be miserable. They truly realized, in a way, the worthlessness and the impermanence of the world. That is what Swami Shardananji says. He says in the Great Master, it is to realize the worthlessness and the impermanence or the temporary nature of the world, no matter how much land you possess. Any catastrophe can happen, like what happened here. It was not planned. You may ask this question, why did God plan this? Just to, we may say, it did not do them any harm. In fact, they came to a better place. So this impermanence, which to that worthlessness and the impermanence in the world, that came spontaneously when they had to encounter these trials and tribulations which they faced. Therefore, a deep sense of renunciation came in the heart. That is how the Lord works. His righteous mind was filled with devotion and reliance on God, because as he started reflecting, yes, worse things could have happened. He could have been thrown into misery, but there is some grace of the Lord that he had fully surrendered to Raghuveer. And Raghuveer had ensured that, as Lord says in the Bhagavad Gita, Ananyas Chintayanto Ma Ye Jana Paryupasate Tesham Nityabhiyuktanam Yogakshemam Vahamyaham. I take care of the needs of a devotee who is totally surrendered to me. He was a householder, he followed dharma as far as he could, and he knew that if he surrendered fully to Raghuveer, so his devotion increased. Many people, when such calamities come, they lose faith in the Lord, whereas here the opposite happened. He thought that Lord has provided me even without my asking. I could have been in worse circumstances. Let me be happy. At least I have got peace of mind. That village which I left behind, so full of evil people, I got such a noble friend here, and I managed to, though the life was not so easy, they had just half an acre of land. So Swami Shardanji says, from that day onwards, even though he was young, had just a 10-year-old boy and a 4-year-old girl with 2 children, he started leading the life of a Vanaprasthi. People now, even after the age of 60, 70, when they are done with, they have retired, but still they hang on to their grandchildren and all the affairs of the world. But here was a family who, leave alone involving himself in money-making pursuits, he decided to live a life like a Vanaprasthi. He was slowly training his son. You now handle this house, you do everything, I am done with. I have to think about the deeper questions of life. That is how the society was designed. So, before he shifted, after he shifted to Kamarpukur, a miraculous incident happened. How he got the stone image of Raghuveer, that is also something wonderful. That for we get a foretaste of what was to come. A divine child, when, as Sri Ramakrishna used to say, when an incarnation comes, he makes all arrangements. He chooses the right family, he chooses the right people, and he gives them hint that he is going to come. So Kshudiram's faith in God increased after coming to Kamarpukur. Though he lost all his wealth, he was contemplating on the divine grace of the Lord, which helped him to at least live a decent life, a noble life, though with all his needs fulfilled. So one day he was traveling to another village on some errand. So on his way home, he became so exhausted that he just wanted to. There was so much of heat, so sun, and he wanted to take some rest under a shady tree. So vast empty meadow he in front of him that brought lot of peace because he was very tired. He was walking all the way. He had gone on some uh, errand there. He wanted to bring something. And this pure breeze and the wonderful meadows, if you see Kamarpukur, you'll get an idea what a lovely countryside place it is. Anyway, he just sat under the tree, and because of the wonderful breeze, the cool breeze under the shade of the tree, he began to dream. And in that dream, his chosen deity, that is his Ishta Devata, Ramchandra appeared before him as a divine boy. Young Ramchandra came, of course, in a dream. He had a very powerful dream. And as they describe, Rama's color was slightly green. His complexion was like a blade of young grass. That is how they describe. As Sri Krishna is supposed to be dark blue, the color of the skin of Sri Krishna, Sri Rama is often described as having the color of the blade of young Durvadala Shama. Durvadala means the small uh, grass, the wonderful blade of young grass, the fresh grass, that green color. So the color of the green grass is what Rama had. So he saw that divine boy with that color. So he immediately knew, even in the dream, that it was Ramchandra who had appeared. And unnoticed, and this Ramchandra was pointing to a particular spot. That young boy, the divine child whom he understood was Ramchandra himself, said, "You see, I have been starving here for so many days. Take me to your home. I am eager to accept your service." So he suddenly saw that this boy is telling him in a dream and pointing to a place nearby where there was a shalagram lying. And he says, "Please take me to your home and worship me. Nobody is giving me prasad, nobody is worshipping me, they have thrown me there." Maybe it was once upon a time worshipped, the Salagrama Shila, Raghuvir's Shila, which is worshipped even today in Kamarpukur. So Shudiram, in the dream, he was overwhelmed with joy and he said, "I am extremely poor, my lord. It's not possible to serve you properly in my hut. You could instead choose to go to a big temple where there will be a lot of seva. I am such a poor man, I don't know whether I can give you bhoga and serve you properly. If I don't serve you properly, I will go to hell." That is what he believed. He was so humble and he was so innocent that he said, "Oh Lord, if you decide to come to my house, I will take you." All these things he is imagining, he is seeing in the dream. So, why do you make such a request? Why do you want to come in to a poor hut of a in the poor hut of a poor Brahmin? I don't even have the means to worship you. But that boy reassured him, "Do not be afraid. I shall be satisfied with whatever you give me, whatever service you can offer to me, even if it is imperfect. Take me with you." He was pleading. So he was not able to control the wonderful emotion, the Lord himself asking me. And suddenly he burst into tears and his dream ended. When he awoke, Shudiram felt that was it just a dream? Had the Lord really come in my dream? And the moment he saw a nearby field, his eyes fell on a nearby field. He immediately recognized, oh, this was the land This was the place which I saw in the dream, and that boy was standing right there. So he was very curious to find out why the Lord Rama appeared and this particular land was shown to me. As he went nearer to that piece of land which he saw in the dream, he saw a beautiful shalagrama, a stone emblem of Vishnu. It has a particular shape. It is Shivalinga is slightly elongated, but the shalagrama is rather flat. So he saw a stone, a shalagrama emblem of Vishnu, and it was being sheltered by a venomous cobra. See, it was so significant that this actually happened. This was not in the dream. In the dream, he just saw the place where this stone would be found. He recognized that, and Rama vanished in his dream, and he was so much overjoyed when Rama assured him, "You don't worry, just take me and worship me." And when he really sees a big snake, Vishnu is supposed to be lying on a bed of, on a very big snake, which protects him. If you see the image, the mythological image of Vishnu, he is lying down on a snake with Lakshmi serving him, and the snake with its hood is protecting Vishnu. So just like that, he saw that a real venomous cobra was guarding that salagrama, as if to say that this is, I am protecting this salagrama, you place, take this with you. He felt that he must possess that stone image and hastened to the spot. The cobra suddenly disappeared, and the shalagrama lay at the entrance of the snake's hole. So the snake went into the hole, and near that hole, that shalagrama was there. So now realizing that this was the dream that he saw, this was the spot where he saw Ramchandra, his heart was filled with so much joy that he realized that it was a divine command. So even people would have been afraid to take that stone which was so near the snake's hole because there was a danger that the snake would bite. But without any fear, he knew it is the Lord himself, is this divine command I have got from the Lord himself. So shouting loudly, Jai Raghuveer, victory to Raghuveer, that was his family deity. So he literally found that the Lord himself has come, and he took that shalagrama which was there before the snake's cobra's den, the hole made by the cobra. The cobra was living inside. So Shudiram was well versed in the scriptures, and he saw the marks that were on the stone, and he decided, and he came to the conclusion. There are certain marks which distinguish an ordinary stone from a shalagrama. So seeing all those marks tallying with that of the scriptures, he was overjoyed, and he said, "This is the Raghuveer. Definitely it is a shalagrama which symbolizes Raghuveer." And he was so much overwhelmed with joy and happiness that he did the ritual, the sanctifying ritual, because as enjoined in the scripture, whenever you get a salagrama, normally they are found on the bed of rivers. So it's very rare to get. Sometimes when the river dries, you get such salagramas. If you can identify it, you can take it and then worship that stone image. That was the tradition. So he installed it in a very ceremonial way because he knew the scriptural injunctions that you cannot just start worshipping them. So before acquiring the image of Raghuveer in this mysterious way, Shudiram had practiced daily worship of his chosen deity Ramchandra and also goddess Shitala. By Shitala was worshipped in a consecrated water vessel. That is what they do, ghata. Ghata with the sacred water is worshipped as an image of goddess Shitala. So he used to worship even before the Salagrama, but now he got, by divine providence, he got this image. So we will conclude today, and this is how the life, despite their poverty, Shudiram was steadfast and dependent on God, and the circumstances led him to embrace the stage of life which is known as Vanaprastha. which every householder is supposed to live. In those days, it came rather early. In Khudiram's uh, life, it came rather early, but normally around 40 and 50, between 40 and 50, when a person would come to the last stage of his life, he would embrace vanaprastha. So the difficult days passed one after another. Difficulties were still there. He had come to a new place. He had to settle down. He had to cultivate, and slowly but he still, because of this newly discovered Raghuvir's Shalagrama, he was very anxious. There was sometimes situation was so bad that there was no food at home. But and Chandra Devi would tell her husband that what shall we feed the children? He said, don't worry. If Raghuvir fasts, his idea was that Raghuvir should get something to eat. If the Lord fasts, so he used to say, if the Lord decides to fast, then can we not fast with him? Under such circumstances, Chandra Devi herself used to fast and depend completely on Raghuvir. So somehow, by some grace of the Lord, the food for that particular day they somehow got by the Lord's grace. So the Lord also did not go hungry, and their basic needs, you can see, were met. So, despite the poverty, despite all these setbacks, Shudiram was steadfast and dependent on God. So, we will conclude here, and uh, now we'll see. There is one question which is there. After that, we will conclude for today. Tomorrow we have our Raj Yoga class. There are two questions here that is asked. How should one surrender being a grahastha? How should one practice detachment from the pleasures of grahastha ashrama, and when it is right time for do it? See, it is everybody has to decide for himself. So, how should one surrender, whether one is a grahastha or not? Even during your childhood or the brahmacharya ashrama, the parents are supposed to tell their children to depend on surrender and live a life dependent solely on God. Though they will be doing all their duties, as Sri Ramakrishna used to say, hold with one hand, hold on to the pillar, and with the other legs you can turn round and round, do whatever you like, but don't leave that hand. So that is the training one has to give to the children. Do anything, do any profession, any occupation that you do as a grahastha is fine, provided the center of your life, the main focus or the center of one's life should be God. So that is how one should uh, try to surrender by contemplating. These things do not happen if one is too busy with lot of pursuits in life. One has to learn the art. Each one has to learn himself the art of reducing his greed and somehow fulfilling the needs. Once the needs are fulfilled to some extent, to moderate extent, even uh, some kind of luxury also may be there. I'm not saying it is not good, but once the limit has come, one should know, one should set a limit for oneself. After that, one has to spend some time. Surrender does not come in one day. One has to cultivate that feeling. Since in Kshudiram's case, he held on to certain dharmic values. We talk about dharma, we talk about Hindu dharma, but we do not realize it is such a difficult thing to hold on to dharma. Otherwise, how can we call? If we are Brahmins and we don't follow the dharma of a Brahmin, then we are as bad as any other person who is not dharmic. Just by being born into a particular dharma doesn't make us, to be born in a Christian family does not make us a true Christian. To be born in the Hindu family doesn't make us a true Hindu. Do we follow the injunctions or the systems or uh, the nature of conduct which has been defined by our Shastra? So thoughtfully they have planned everything. How to plan a slowly gradual withdrawal After acquiring knowledge, after getting everything side by side, one has to learn the spirit of surrender. That is how life should be, but unfortunately it is not. The second thing, how should one practice detachment from the pleasures of grahastha ashrama? And when is the right time? The right time is childhood. Obviously it is childhood. If a child is not taught, you can't expect him to suddenly give up. Sometimes, of course, there are exceptions. All the things may be snatched away, and then that vairagya may come, like in the case of Buddha. He was not taught. There is no fixed time. He was not taught that you should give up. In fact, he was taught the opposite. His father had told him, no, everything should be enjoyed. There was no sorrow in his life. So it all depends on the person. Buddha came to it after the birth of his child. He did not even know what renunciation was. But suddenly there was a transformation. So there is no fixed time how to learn, how to practice detachment. It does not come by planning. It has to, of course, you can plan. Especially in the childhood, if the children are told the other side of life, not only the competitive and academic side, but there is a spiritual side. It has to go side by side. Nobody says that you have to renounce everything. You have to see that the life is balanced. Hindu, a true dharmic life, if we claim, if we boast that we belong to a dharma, it's not just by birth. We may be born into a Hindu family, but we may be the most adharmic people because we are breaking the traditions. If we have to follow the traditions, if we say we are Brahmins, we have to behave like Brahmins. Otherwise, you better give up the caste system, give up, say I'm an atheist. At least the atheist is very honest. Swamiji says atheist is much more honest because he doesn't claim to be a dharmic person and not follow dharma. So Hinduism, the Varnashrama dharma, which has to be understood. If we don't understand it, we have to take pains to understand it. That is what the scriptures do. Why should the children be taught these things? They may or may not follow it. If they don't follow it, they have to be told that you are not dharmic. You don't qualify to be called a dharmic person. So this is what we have to understand. And the right time is now. Right time, you have asked, when is the right time? Right time is now. If you have understood, the time is, it has to be done immediately. The right time can be when the child is just born or even before the child is born. After that, the parents have their duties. Once the child grows, then he has to understand with whatever knowledge he has got from his noble parents. He has to follow it and practice it. So there is no right time as such. The earlier, the better. In Prahlada's life, you will find, though he was born in an Asuric family, somehow he came to the conclusion that surrendering to Hari. So he was, though he was born in an Asuric family, uh, uh, but he was by all, for all practical purposes, he was the Brahmin of Brahmins. Whatever be his parents, whatever they did, Prahlada and all these wonderful Hiranyakashipu, you will find his son Dhruva, uh, uh, Prahlada, and then we have the Dhruva, who also belonged to a Kshatriya family, but he was so devoted to Vishnu. So you will find such exceptions when by character, one by nobility, one follows the Varnashrama dharma, which was designed originally, but unfortunately, in the name of Varnashrama dharma, so many wrong interpretations have been done now. So it is the birth in a particular varna or a ashrama does not make us fit for that. We have to make ourselves fit, and the sooner the better. Yeah. So I'll take your leave. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.